She was just a kind-hearted pharmacy clerk until one rainy December evening. She whispered a phrase that stopped a billionaire in his tracks. ... The exact words his missing daughter said before vanishing 17 years ago. What followed was a journey through secrets, betrayal, and a truth that would shatter everything. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and like the video and drop a comment below, letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The wind howled through the streets of Lakeview as heavy rain slammed against the glass front of Lakeside Pharmacy. It was one of those bone-deep, cold nights that made the world feel like it had forgotten how to be kind. Inside the store, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly as Ivy Rivers wiped the counter for the third time that hour. Her emerald eyes looked distant, lost in thought, while a soft tune escaped her lips. It was a lullaby she didn't remember learning, yet had hummed for as long as she could recall. "Ivy, dear," came a shaky voice from behind. Ivy turned and saw Mrs. Wilma Cruz, the sweet older woman who lived down the block. Wilma clutched a small, wrinkled prescription in one hand and her coat tightly in the other. "Hi, Mrs. Cruz. What do you need today?" Ivy asked gently, coming around the counter with her usual warmth. Wilma's lips trembled as she placed the paper on the counter. "It's for my granddaughter's insulin. The doctor says she needs it right away. ... But ... Double quotes, her voice broke. "I don't have enough this month. Groceries, rent, everything's gone up. I thought maybe you could help work something out." Ivy looked at the price on the screen. $330. She knew Wilma didn't have that kind of money. Ivy also knew she didn't either. Not really. Her savings were almost gone, mostly going to Ward helping her Aunt Clara with cancer treatments. Still, she didn't hesitate. "I can cover part of it," Ivy said softly, reaching into her worn wallet. "We'll figure out the rest later." Wilma's eyes welled up with tears. "Honey, no, I can't let you do that." "It's all right," Ivy whispered. "Sometimes ... people just need someone to show up." She swiped her card. It was a simple act, quiet and unnoticed almost.
Almost.
Hidden in aisle 4, behind the cold medicine display, stood a man in a dark coat. He wasn't browsing. Lucas' heart stood perfectly still, his hands gripping the edge of the shelf, his eyes locked onto Ivy. For a moment, time seemed to slow, something in her voice, ... the kindness. The way her hand brushed the scar on her forehead when she was nervous. It all came crashing back to him like a wave he'd waited years to see again. Lucas had been walking into small pharmacies across the country for 17 years, not because he needed anything, but because he was looking for her, his daughter. Mia Hart, taken from him when she was only 6 years old. Vanished after a stormy December night in 1,000 unanswered questions. He was about to step forward when a shout cut through the quiet. "Ivy Rivers." Brent Dalton's voice echoed through the small store like thunder. The pharmacy manager's angry face flushed red as he marched over. Ivy froze, card still in hand.
8.
"What do you think you're doing?" Brent barked. "Helping," Ivy said, her voice small. "I was using my own money. I don't care whose money it is." Brent snapped, snatching the prescription from the counter. "This isn't a charity. You're not here to be everybody's savior." Wilma shrank back, crying. A few customers turned to watch. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Lucas stepped closer, heart pounding. "You've done this before," Brent hissed. "Giving discounts, letting people pay later, getting too involved. It's over. Pack up your things. You're fired." Ivy didn't say a word. Her cheeks burned, her throat tight. With slow, deliberate steps, she turned toward the back to gather her things. Her hands shook as she emptied her locker, a sweater, a plant, a ceramic coffee mug. She placed them gently into a cardboard box. When she came back out, her chin lifted, eyes glassy but proud. "Let me still pay for the insulin," she said, gently holding out her card. "Absolutely not," Brent growled. "You don't work here anymore." Ivy paused. Then, as if from a place deep in her soul, she whispered something soft, something that didn't quite belong to this moment. "Kind angels don't rush," she said, her voice nearly lost in the storm outside. They wait until the right time, to help the right people. Lucas felt his legs weaken. He gripped the edge of a shelf for support. Those words, that phrase. He hadn't heard them in 17 years, not since Mia used to whisper them into his ear during bedtime stories. It was something they had made up together. It was theirs. But it wasn't just the words. It was how she said them. A little tilt of her head. The gentle way her fingers brushed that old scar. Ivy Rivers stepped out into the freezing rain, holding her box to her chest. Lucas stared at the door long after it closed behind her. His phone was already in his hand. "Samir," he said, his voice shaking. "Get to Lakeside Pharmacy. Think... God help me. I think I just found Mia." The winter sun rose weakly over Lakeview, shining pale light on Ivy Rivers' cluttered kitchen table. She sat there in her pajama pants, spooning cereal that had already gone soggy. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown caller. She ignored it. Bill collectors had become regular guests. Aunt Clara, coughing softly from the sofa bed, gave Ivy a tired smile. Maybe it's good news. Ivy doubted it until the phone rang a third. Time and displayed the pharmacy's number. Brent Dalton's voice came through, too bright to be natural. He told Ivy that a new investor had bought Lakeside Pharmacy overnight. Investor wanted fresh ideas, better community outreach, and surprise Ivy, back on staff. Not just as a clerk, but as the new store manager with a 40% raise. Her silence lasted so long that Brent asked if the line had died. Ivy finally said she would think about it and hung up. 2 blocks away, Lucas Hart stood in an empty office that still smelled of fresh paint. Overnight, his legal team had wired funds, signed papers, and placed him as owner of the tiny store on Oak Avenue. He stared out the window at morning traffic, heart hammering with a mixture of hope and dread. If Ivy really was Mia, bringing her back under the same roof would let him study every detail. It was risky, perhaps manipulative. Yet after 17 years of searching, patience felt impossible. Around noon, Ivy walked to the hospital with soup for Aunt Clara's treatment day. She shared the crazy job offer while unpacking plastic spoons and napkins. Clara's thin hands trembled as she lifted the steaming cup. "Take it," she whispered. "We need the money." She tried to sound practical, but Ivy caught the fear. In her eyes, a fear that the cancer bills would swallow them both. Ivy agreed, though the sudden generosity made no sense. The next morning, Ivy pushed open the pharmacy door and stopped short. New scanners, fresh paint, and spotless floors replaced. The tired aisles she'd left behind. Boxes of donated vitamins sat near the entrance with a handwritten sign, "Free for seniors." Brent hovered nearby, seeming small inside his new suit. "Our owner wants lots of changes," he said, gesturing toward the back. Ideas, innovation, compassion. The word compassion tasted odd coming from him. Lucas appeared beside a shelf of cough drops, wearing rolled-up sleeves and a name tag that simply read "Volunteer." Ivy blinked in surprise. Billionaires did not usually stock shelves. Lucas explained that he liked to understand daily operations firsthand. Throughout the day, he shadowed her quietly. He noticed how she arranged children's vitamins by color, just as Mia had sorted crayons. He watched her hum that familiar lullaby while tallying receipts. Even saw her left hand reach for the pen before the right one remembered to do the job. Left-handed another match. At noon, he invited the staff to the break room for pastries. Ivy smiled politely until she saw one plate piled high with chocolate donuts. Ice flooded her veins. She stepped back, covering her mouth. "I'm allergic," she said, voice shaky. "Sorry, I can't even be near them." Lucas apologized and whisked the donuts away, but inside his pulse roared. Mia had been rushed to the ER after a chocolate chip cookie at a birthday party. The list of coincidences grew unbearable. All afternoon clouds gathered outside. 5 o'clock thunder cracked so loudly that the windows rattled. Rain hammered the roof in fierce waves. Eva's face went white. She excused herself and disappeared. Lucas found her 10 minutes later in the staff bathroom, knees hugged too, her chest humming that old tune through ragged breaths. He crouched beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Storms scare me too," he said gently. She glanced up, shocked to see him there, but grateful for the calm in his voice. They sat together until the thunder drifted east, while Lucas comforted. Ivy, Detective Samir Khan, sat in a cluttered records room downtown, scrolling through decades-old files. Clara Rivers, he learned, had once been Clara Winter. She had vanished for 2 full years after a December crash that killed Sophie Hart, Lucas's wife. During that gap, she resurfaced in Lakeview with a 6-year-old niece whose paperwork looked hastily prepared. Samir's gut clenched. The timeline fit too neatly to be chance. Ordered a sealed juvenile record and called. Lucas' evening settled in. Ivy stayed late to finish inventory. Passing Brent's office, she spotted a receipt on the desk. An anonymous. Payment for Wilma Cruz's insulin dated the night Ivy was fired. The amount was identical to what Lucas had tried to pay. Suspicion flared. She slipped the receipt into her pocket. Closing time. Lucas was wiping counters like any diligent volunteer. Ivy approached, receipt in hand. "Why did you pay that bill?" she demanded. Lucas hesitated, then said only, "Because you care about people, that matters." His answer felt too smooth, too rehearsed. Ivy's stomach knotted. Outside, wind whipped the street. Lucas's phone vibrated. Assumer's voice crackled, urgent. "I ran the DNA on that hairbrush you mailed me. Match is 99.9%. Lucas Ivy Rivers is MIA. Lightning split the sky, thunder boomed, and Lucas stared through the rain-streaked glass at Ivy as she locked the doors for the night. Every step she took away felt like losing her all over again. He ended the call, heart racing. Soon he would have proof enough to claim the truth, yet the truth itself might shatter the girl he had just begun to know. In the parking lot, Ivy paused, glancing back at the store where a stranger's eyes followed her every move. Trust and doubt wrestled inside her chest. Storm behind them was easing, but a larger one made of secrets, blood, and broken years was about to break wide open. The collapse came without warning. Ivy Rivers was spooning soup into Aunt Clara's trembling hands. When the older woman's eyes rolled back and the bowl hit the floor, panic shoved everything else aside. Ivy dialed 911, her voice shaking while she begged the operator to hurry. The ride to Mercy Hospital felt endless, sirens slicing the night air. Ivy squeezed Clara's cold fingers and whispered that help was coming, even though fear told her help might be too late. Dr. Nathan's song met the gurney at the emergency bay. Its calm tone could not hide hard truth. The cancer had spread to Clara's lungs, and her body was losing the fight. Ivy followed him into a small family room. Fluorescent lights hummed, chairs were stiff, and the clock on the wall ticked too loudly. "We're talking days, doctor," Song said gently. The words toppled Ivy's sense of safety. Days, not weeks, not months' days. While paperwork was being signed, Katz's heart appeared in the hallway, rainwater still clinging to his coat. Ivy froze at the sight of him. She had not told him where they were, yet here he was, eyes full of worry she did not want to understand. Clara asked to speak with Lucas alone. Ivy, exhausted and confused, stepped outside the room but pressed her ear against the thin wooden door. Inside, Clara's voice was faint but clear. "Lucas, I took Mia because I thought I was protecting her." Ivy's breath caught. "Mia?" She pressed closer. Clara went on. "After the crash, she was screaming for her mother. You were gone on another trip. I panicked. I told myself a lie that you would break if you saw her grief, so I ran." Ivy's pulse hammered. Every word felt like glass in her chest. Lucas's answer was heavy with years of sorrow. "I was broken anyway. I searched the world for her. Clara, you could have called." Clara coughed hard, then whispered, "I know. I have lived with that guilt every minute. Right, please forgive me." Ivy couldn't listen anymore. She backed, away, heart slamming against her ribs. The name Mia echoed in her skull. A name she had never heard, but somehow belonged to her. She fled down the corridor, pushing through the swinging doors until cold night air slapped her cheeks. Her phone buzzed. Detective Samir Khan's name flashed. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Ow." "I found something important," Samir said. "Please meet me at the diner on 6th. It's about your mother." Ivy almost shouted that her mother was dying upstairs. Instead, she whispered, "I'll be there." Half an hour later, Ivy slid into a booth opposite Samir. He slid a weathered envelope across the table. "Your father gave me this tonight. It's a letter your mother, Sophie Hart, wrote the night she died. She meant for him and you to read it." Ivy's fingers shook as she unfolded the brittle pages. Sophie's words spilled hope and regret, saying she never wanted to leave. She loved Lucas, and she adored their little girl, Mia. Sophie had begged her sister Clara to watch Mia for one night, promising to return. Ivy felt tears blur the ink. Samir spoke softly. Clara never told Lucas about the letter until today. He thought Sophie was running away. The truth is, she was coming back. Ivy's world tilted again. Sophie was her mother. Lucas was her father. Claire had stolen years that could never be replaced. Dizzy, Ivy grabbed the table edge. "Why tell me now?" Samir's eyes were kind. "Because secrets eat people alive. You deserve the whole story." That same moment, nausea twisted Ivy's stomach. She rushed to the restroom, barely making it before sickness came in painful waves. Afterward, she stared at her pale reflection. 2 days of shock, too little food, and bottomless fare. Yet deeper down was another suspicion she could not ignore. She bought a test from a vending machine outside the diner. 10 minutes later, the tiny window showed a bold pink line. Pregnant, Julian's child. A new life starting inside her while her own life had just been torn apart. Back at the hospital, halls were quiet except for distant monitors. Ivy found Lucas sitting alone, head in his hands. Without speaking, she handed him Sophie's letter. He read it slowly, tears sliding down his face. When he finished, he looked up. "I never stopped loving her," he whispered. "I never stopped loving you." Ivy's anger flared. "Loving me? You tested my DNA without asking. You bought my workplace to spy on me." Lucas nodded, shame in his eyes. "I was desperate. Wrong, but desperate. I'm sorry." Ivy's thoughts tangled. Clara's betrayal, Lucas's mistakes, Sophie's love. Her hand drifted to her stomach. Finally, she spoke. "There's more you don't know. I'm going to have a baby." Lucas's breath hitched. "You won't face this alone," he said. Ivy almost laughed at the promise. She'd never felt more alone in her life. Yet she saw something sincere in his shattered expression. A man trying to make amends across 17 empty years. Doctor. Song stepped out of Clara's room. "She's awake again, asking for you both." Ivy's legs felt heavy as lead, but she walked inside. Clara lay propped on pillows, skin gray, yet her eyes brightened when she saw Ivy. "Sweetheart, I never wanted to hurt you," Clara rasped. Ivy swallowed hard. "You did hurt me, but you also loved me." "I don't know how to feel both things at once." Clara squeezed her hand. "Love is messy. Forgive if you can. Remember, kind angels do not rush." Ivy closed her eyes. The phrase had once brought comfort. Now it felt like a key unlocking 2 lives in her heart. Opening them again, she whispered, "I'll try." Clara's smile was small, but peaceful. Outside the window, dawn was breaking, pale gold spilling over hospital roofs. In that fragile light, Ivy understood nothing would ever be simple again yet. Truth, no matter how painful, was better than living in the dark. Secrets had shattered, but daylight offered the chance to rebuild what remained. 8 months later, the scent of blooming lilacs drifted through the open window of Ivy's small nursery. Morning sun warmed the room, lighting up soft pink walls. And the quiet bundle, sleeping in a crib by the corner? Ivy stood beside it, rocking gently on her feet. Her daughter Willow Grace had arrived one humid afternoon in Augustine, loud and perfect. Ivy still hadn't quite wrapped her head around being a mother. But every time she looked into Willow's green eyes, she felt a kind of peace that wrapped around her heart, like a warm blanket. Lucas' Hart stood behind her, careful not to speak. Too loudly. "She has your eyes," he said softly. Ivy turned, smiling. "And your stubborn mouth," she teased. They both laughed, but there was truth in it. Willow had pieces of both of them, a link between a broken past and a hopeful future. The road to this morning hadn't been easy. Ivy and Lucas had spent weeks after Clara's funeral in a kind of emotional dance. Some days where good conversations flowed, Memories were shared. Other days were harder, full of unspoken things and long silences. But slowly, piece by piece, they had started to rebuild something that resembled a relationship. Not the perfect father-daughter story, but something real. Julian Park. Willow's father and Ivy's steady partner through everything had become the quiet center of their little family. He'd never questioned Ivy's right to change, to grow, or even to fall apart. When Ivy had told him the full truth about her past, the kidnapping, the lost name, the father who found her in a pharmacy, he had listened without judgment. "Still you," he'd said, wrapping her in his arms. "Who you were, who you art, all part of the same story." Now Ivy stood at the window of the new foundation office, holding Willow in her arms. Across the hall, volunteers worked to set up for the afternoon's dedication ceremony. It was the grand opening of the Sophie and Clara Trust, named for the two women who had shaped Ivy's life in such different but lasting ways. Lucas's idea had grown into something bigger than either of them imagined. The trust would offer therapy for children dealing with trauma, reunification services for families separated by tragedy, and support for those navigating long-lost identities. The foundation's headquarters were built inside a restored library. Ivy loved that it used to be a place filled with stories. Now it would be a place where real stories could find healing. On one wall of the main hall hung 3 framed portraits. Sophie Hart smiling in a summer dress, Clara Rivers holding a laughing child, and a photo of 6-year-old me wearing a red coat and holding a stuffed bear. Ivy had found it in an old box Lucas kept. And though she didn't remember the moment it was taken, something in the way the little girl stood felt deeply familiar. Guests began to arrive, city officials, social workers, families the trust had already helped. Ivy handed Willow to Julian and made her way to the front. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. She wasn't a natural speaker, but this was her story to tell, and it needed to be told. "When I was a child," she began, "I lived under one name. When I was a teen, I answered to another. Now, as a mother, I've decided both are part of me. I'm Ivy Rivers. I'm also Mia Hart. I don't have to choose between them. They both led me here." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. What happened to me was painful. I lost years with my father. I lived a life built on lies, even if those lies were meant to protect me. But what I've learned is that pain doesn't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the middle. She glanced at Lucas, who stood beside Julian, rocking Willow gently. "The people we become are shaped by those who love us, whether they're with us for 6 years or 60. Today, this foundation begins its work in honor of 2 women. My mother, Sophie, who never got to return home, and my Aunt Clara, who gave me one, even if the way she did it was wrong. They both loved fiercely. They both gave everything." The crowd stood and clapped. Ivy felt her cheeks flush, but a warmth settled in her chest after the speeches and ribbon cutting. Ivy walked out to the riverfront with Lucas, Julian, and Willow. The trust had organized a lantern lighting ceremony to honor missing family members and new beginnings. Dozens of people held small paper lanterns, waiting for dusk. Ivy leaned into Julian as they watched the sky turn purple. Lucas handed Willow a tiny lantern made just for her. She giggled, waving her chubby hands toward the candle inside. "Ready, little one?" Ivy whispered. Willow clapped together. They released the lantern into the evening air. Hundreds of soft lights floated up into the sky, dancing above the water like fireflies. Willow pointed upward, then looked at Ivy with wide eyes and said her newest word, clear and bright, "Home." Ivy smiled through tears. Yes, they were finally home. Not the one stolen from them, but one they had built, piece by piece, with truth, forgiveness, and love. And now, they were ready for every chapter to come.